I'm just gonna come out and say this. Fish is underrated. If I'm Joe Blow, USA, and I'm listing my favorite meats, fish is not in the top 10. I'd rather eat bear meat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner than eat fish. The only way I'm eating fish is if it's salmon, and I'm on vacation, and they're out of steak and pork chops, and I had chicken for lunch. Trust me, I get it. The guy on the line at Chuck's Bar and Grill is just as bummed about cooking that fish as you're gonna be about eating it. Today we're gonna try and avoid some of the common pitfalls. We're gonna make a pan-roasted, crispy-skinned fish with some pan-fried, crushed potatoes, and a really simple, super versatile salsa verde. Maybe some fresh dill? Now you're into it. For this recipe, we need 4 to 6 ounces of fish fillet, preferably a striped bass, a sockeye salmon, or trout. I bought some whole striped bass on sale at the local Amazon Prime grocery fulfillment center by my house. Don't sweat the species too much. We just need fish that's about 1 inch thick and has some nice skin. I liked the look of this whole fish, and I used to cut fish professionally as a chef, so that's the route that I went. You can see me break it down here, and I'm gonna get into that process in a future video. If I'm being honest, I'm just flexing to myself. I wanted to prove I could still cut fish. It's been like 2 years. The first step is salting our fillets. Using a generous amount of kosher salt, we're gonna season both sides liberally, and then we're gonna put in the fridge for 20 minutes. The rest of this recipe comes together in about that time, so it's perfect. We're gonna start by boiling some waxy potatoes. We're gonna cover these potatoes with water, put in a generous amount of salt, maybe 3-4 tablespoons, and simmer until they're tender, about 15 minutes. Once they're tender, we're just gonna drain them and set them aside to come to room temp. For our sauce, we're gonna jump into the garden. We're making an herby salsa verde today, so I'm grabbing parsley, basil, dill, cilantro. All are easily available at the grocery store. One herb you definitely don't wanna miss out though is basil. If you're a little bit short on dill, for example, you can make up with parsley or cilantro, no big deal, but definitely make sure you're getting the basil. The sweetness of the basil is kind of like an essential thing for making it taste balanced. For this, you're gonna need 5 grams or 2 tablespoons fresh dill, 10 grams or a 1/4 cup cilantro, 25 grams or a 1/2 cup parsley, 25 grams or a 1/2 cup basil, 110 grams or 1 cup olive oil, 1/8 of a red onion or a diced 30 grams, and 20 grams of capers. First, we're gonna dice our 40 grams of onion. As you can see, I'm going kind of with a small dice. We don't want big chunks when it comes to a delicate piece of fish. Another thing I'm doing to cut the raw edge is to take it over to the sink and just run it under some cold water to rinse off that sort of sulfury flavor. Oh yeah, and the quick pro level bad boy power move here is to put these red onions in a drink of red wine vinegar. We're just gonna cover and set that aside for 15 minutes. The acidity of this salsa verde is gonna come from the acid in the red onions instead of something like lemon juice just mixed in with the herbs. That could make it go brown. So the onions are gonna sit there for about 15 minutes and marinate. We're gonna chop our herbs. Start with 1 teaspoon of salt on your cutting board, followed by the cilantro and the parsley. Start chopping roughly to break these down. We're gonna follow with the basil and continue to chop. We chop these in stages so we don't bruise the more delicate herbs like basil and dill. After a few chops on the basil, we're gonna fold in our capers, and then our dill, and then we're gonna chop, and then we're gonna chop. Scoop into a bowl and then whisk in your olive oil. After 15 minutes, add in your onions and 1 tablespoon of the vinegar they're sitting in. We can get rid of the rest of this vinegar. And there you go, that's our sauce for our fish. As some of you know, I spent about a year being a seafood specialist. One of the things I learned in that job was how the supply chain for fresh fish really works. The truth is, what people think of as fresh fish is actually a lot different. Usually the fish that arrives at your grocery store or fishmonger has been out of the water for 5 to 7 days at that point. Think about it, if you're a fisherman, you have to pay for gas for your boat. You're not gonna go 200 miles out to the snapper fishery during the day just to come back at night. No, you're gonna fill your boat up with gas, and then you're gonna catch fish as you go. You're gonna throw them on ice in the hold, and when you get back to land, you're gonna sell them. It sounds kind of gross, but the good news is, as long as the fish isn't temperature abused in transit, it's actually totally fine. The majority of the time, if the people you're buying it from have taken care of it, the fish you're getting is gonna have 4 to 6 days of shelf life. You can really make sure you're getting that life if you're keeping it on ice or in the back of your fridge where it's as cold. The other option is to just use it as soon as possible. Now it's time to make our supper. This dish comes together really quickly, and it's perfect for a weeknight or a dinner party with friends whenever that may happen. You can show them that you're a considerate, civilized member of society and you know how to put heat onto fish. So we're gonna heat a large cast iron skillet over medium-high heat. Now is where I tell you how to pan roast fish. There's 3 things we need to pay attention to whenever we're cooking pan roasted fish. The first one is we wanna have dry skin. You can see here that I'm blotting off the skin with paper towel. We salted it 20 minutes ago, we drew out some moisture, moisture, I'm getting rid of that moisture and drying out my skin as much as I can. The second thing is hot pan. We wanna make sure that we're not medium, but we're hot. We don't want it as hot as the sun, but we definitely want it so hot that that fish sizzles the second it hits the pan. The third detail is don't touch it. We're gonna leave it in the pan undisturbed for 5 to 6 minutes and let that skin get crispy. The longer we let it sit undisturbed, the easier it will be to release from the pan. So we're gonna do just that. Into a very well heated hot pan, we're gonna put a tablespoon or so of neutral oil, and then we're gonna press the fish into that hot pan for 10 seconds per piece. The reason we do this is that the fish skin and flesh contract super quickly once it gets hot. Pressing it down makes sure the fish skin stays in contact with the pan and doesn't curl up. After about 10 seconds, it relaxes and then we can move on to our next piece. I'm doing 2 pieces here because it's just Lauren and I for lunch. If you have a pan where you can fit 4 fillets, I highly recommend you do that. While we're crisping up this skin, we're gonna gently smash these potatoes that we cooked on our cutting board and set them aside. After about 4 minutes of leaving this fish undisturbed, we're just gonna check the corner to make sure we're on the right track. After about 7 minutes, the fish has fully released itself from the pan. The cooking does this. You don't necessarily need to use your spatula to peel it off. The skin is looking really good. It's nice and dark brown and crisp and even across the entire surface. So I'm gonna turn off my heat and then I'm gonna flip over my fish and just let it very gently cook for another 20 seconds or so. I'm gonna take my fish out of the pan, set it aside, return that pan to a high heat, put 3 tablespoons of neutral oil. I'm using avocado. Once your pan is good and hot, we're gonna throw these smashed potatoes into the pan and fry them for about 6 to 8 minutes per side, seasoning with salt generously. We're looking to get really crispy potatoes here, so we wanna make sure that there's a good amount of fat in the pan. Once I flip them over, I'm gonna add a little bit more oil just to make sure that they're sizzling. After 10 minutes total, they look great. I'm gonna set them aside. Now we're gonna plate up our fish. We've got our salsa verde ready to go. We've got our crispy fish, and we got our crispy potatoes. If you got some extra herbs sitting around, that's a great idea too. I'm gonna be using dill, chervil, and maybe a little bit of parsley. Okay. Nice crispy potatoes with pan roasted fish and salsa verde.
It's good. I think this is my favorite condiment that you make.
That skin is crisp, dude. That skin is crisp, dude. This is a good lunch. So that's it. Maybe it's time to cook some fish at home. All we need is a hot pan, a nice piece of fish, and some dry skin. Oh, and don't forget about those crispy potatoes and that super easy salsa verde. Keep them in mind as a weeknight side or a way to flex when your friends are over. It's just delicious. So I hope you had fun watching me cook some fish and crisp some skin. If you got value out of this content, please hit subscribe, tell a friend, and we'll see you next time.